Good afternoon. Welcome. The final session for this year's Oregon Wine Symposium is about direct-to-consumer metrics. What we're going to be doing is taking a look at some benchmark data provided from WineDirect of what happened in 2018, and we're going to give you an opportunity to think about, okay, if this is what's happening in my region, in Oregon, how does it compare to what's happening at my winery? I'm Leslie Berglund. I have a company called the Wise Academy, and I'm joined here on the panel with Jim Egger, and Jim is with WineDirect. He's the VP of Marketing and Business Development. He's been on the service side of the wine industry for years. Before WineDirect, he was with Ship Compliant and Federal Express, and has a lot of deep knowledge in how the direct-to-consumer side of our business works. I'm also joined by my colleague Liz Mercer, who is a coach at the Wise Academy, and she spends about half of her time with us, and the other half of her time she's actually a general manager of a small urban winery in San Francisco called Bluxom. And so she'll be speaking with both hats on, but a lot from her personal experience, not only at Bluxom, but she's run direct-to-consumer programs for the past 20 plus years in the wine industry and has a lot of things to share. Before we get going, what we have out in front of you guys is a worksheet. And what I'd love for you to do is to take a moment before we start revealing what the benchmark data is, go through, and you may not know all this information off the top of your head. That's okay. When you get back to the winery, you can fill it out. But whatever you do know, even if it's just general direction, I'd like you to write it down. The things that we're going to be talking about for your wine club, do you know what your tenure is? And by tenure, we mean the average number of months your wine club member stays a club member. That's tenure. Do you know what your annual attrition rate is for wine club? And attrition, how you calculate that is you take for a given period of time, this would be for a whole year, the total number of members you lost divided by the number of members you started with. So what percent attrition do you have on an annual basis? For your wine club, if you track it, do you know off the top of your head, what's your number one or number two reasons members quit? If you ask them, and I hope you do, why do they say that they're leaving your club? Attrition is just part of the nature of the beast. We all have attrition in our clubs. But why are most people, when they leave you, why are they leaving? The fourth question about wine club is, do you do customization? That's a yes or no. And by that, do you do customization with a technology solution or just by hand? You've got the list of the exceptions that you're going to tailor each shipment, or do you do, if you do customization, are you using a technology platform to do that? That'll be part of our discussion. Switching then to digital side of our direct-to-consumer business, do you know what percentage of your total direct-to-consumer sales come through your website, your e-commerce, your social media activities? And then also, this next question is binary. Is your website mobile friendly? And if you don't know, if you haven't checked it yourself recently, just pull it up on your phone right now and see how friendly it is. Is it mobile enabled? If you know your AOV, which is average order value, in general, what is it for your tasting room? What is it for your average club shipment? What is it for your website sales, your digital sales? And that will be part of our conversation as well. For the tasting room, do you know your average monthly visitors, or take your annual visitors and divide it by 12? For your tasting room, what are the highest month or months that we actually see tasting room sales here in Oregon, or wherever you're from, throughout the year? Peak months. What are your average tasting fees? And if you have two different fees, regular and perhaps a reserve tasting or something, what are those? And do you, this is a binary question, do you have an online reservation system for people who are coming to your tasting room? Can they make an appointment or set up a tasting online? So with that in mind, I'm going to turn this over to Jim, who's going to walk us through our first set of data. And here's how this process is going to work. Jim's going to share the data because a lot of it comes from his company, which is awesome. And then we're going to have it's really going to be a conversation around when Liz and I look at it, or other information Jim knows, what's coming up for us when we're looking at this data. If we've had winery clients that are having the good news happen or the bad news happen of what we're seeing on these data sets, what are lessons that we've learned. We will open it up to Q&A at the end, but for those of you who have are on the Oregon Wine Symposium app, you can certainly send questions in, and I'll be monitoring that as we go as well. And we will wrap by 5 o'clock. Thank you.
Great, yeah. Thanks for joining the session. You guys are troopers for sticking around for this late afternoon session. A quick note about the methodology and data source. So WineDirect is an e-commerce, tasting room, wine club, and light CRM package that's used by wineries, over 1,800 wineries worldwide. So that data, in an anonymous and non-specific, unidentifiable way, was aggregated, and we've just been slicing it a little bit to try to extract insights that could be used by the industry at large. This effort grew from the uncertainty and kind of internal arguments that would spring up when people are comparing survey data versus actual transaction data. So we said, we've got the transaction data, let's uncork this and see what we can find out for the benefit of the industry at large. So the first point I want to make is this is a massive data set. So over 1,800 wineries, each year somewhere between 1.2 and $1 billion in DTC sales transactions are run through the platform. If you just narrow this down, and a lot of the data I'm sharing has been sliced specifically for Oregon, and over 250 Oregon wineries are using our platform, so their data has contributed to this set as well. So, Wine Club, 1,800 wineries, 1.3 million Wine Club members. We feel like that's a cool representative sample to teach us a little bit about what's going on out there. So industry benchmark for all wineries, the average tenure, length of life in the wine club is 31 months. So, a piece that you can compare to your own business. The annual attrition rate across all club memberships, 25%. So 25% of people that join in a club are churning out by the end of the year. So we can take this a little more narrowly based on the size of your wine club. You see that there's varying attrition rates, so you can compare this against your own personal experience. One neat thing about our platform is that wineries are able to record a cancellation reason every time someone cancels. Now, I'm sure many of you have had this conversation. You can question the validity. It's an awkward conversation oftentimes for the consumer, and they might not give a fully truthful answer. But if you look at the top 5 reasons that we represent here, number 1 is financial reasons. Number 2 is too much wine, health or pregnancy. My doctor says I drink too much. That's a total conversation ender right there. And then some other ones that are not given or other are moving, which seems, I guess, okay if you're moving to Utah.
So before we go to the next slide, just anything jump out for you, Liz, on this one?
Absolutely. So when I look at this slide, I see that there are basically, 52% of the reasons, financial and too much wine, are something that I can work with. Mm-hmm. So half of the cancellation reasons, can I come up with a solution? And granted, there are those, they've lost their job, they're retiring or moving into a different stage in their life. For a financial reason, that truly does make sense for them to become an alumni member, a different phase of their life cycle with us. For those that have too much wine, can I come up with a solution that works for them? I often tell members when I'm signing them up in the tasting room, if it's not working for you, it's not working for us. Let's find a solution. And oftentimes at the point of acquisition, even having that conversation that we're open to making this work for you helps us increase our tenure. But we get creative when we come up with those reasons or ways to keep members in our clubs.
The other thing, something that jumps out for me is, I know with the wineries that I coach on metrics and club, et cetera, really focusing on how to minimize that not given the reason, which I always look at it and say, that's just because we forgot to ask. I mean, like, we didn't really want to have that conversation. And because so often oh, I'm so sorry you're leaving, it's not necessarily trying to save them, because they're voting with their feet. They're saying, hey, it's time to move on. But finding out why, and then you can figure out, and this was like the original concept around custom clubs, hey, maybe, because I started out as a wine retailer, actually, in direct-to-consumer. We didn't have bricks and mortar. And when you find out why they were no longer going to be a member of the club, sometimes it's not that they're quitting us and our brand. Sometimes it's just they have enough confidence now, they know what they want to buy. And so figuring out, okay, great, we're just going to send you a case of Zinfandel once a quarter, and that doesn't really fit another club. But there was kind of an early save mechanism, ends up being today on a more proactive basis what we're doing with customization. So, Jim, I know you have some stuff from McKinsey, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and if I could just kind of summarize those financial reasons and too much wine, if you want to translate that, it's like, I have a problem with your wine club. Not necessarily too much wine, because that person's buying from somebody else. All right, so I thought it was useful to look outside our industry, especially now since there's a lot of great data out there relative to other types of subscription services. So a recent study that was done by McKinsey Consulting on subscription businesses, and these are massive billion-dollar subscription businesses like Blue Apron, Dollar Shave Club, Stitch Fix, ones that we're all familiar with, including like Amazon subscription services around towels and things like that. But they asked over 5,000 consumers these two key questions. One is, why do you stay? And number one of the reasons given was personalization. And then number two, which was an interesting one, that surprise and delight. So I thought these were really, instructive for wine clubs. Number one is, this is another reason that reinforces the need for some sort of choice in a wine club, and even if you're late to adopt some sort of user choice club, consumers are speaking out like over and over that they want some sort of input. There's one piece of data that I didn't include, but across all of our user choice clubs on our platform, and I think it's nearly 2/3 of our customers have some sort of custom club now. When given an option, only 20% of the time will a consumer change it. So if you ask all those consumers, 100% of them will say, I love the choice. I love the choice. It's great. But only 20% are actually pulling that lever and making it. They're taking your suggestion at face value, but they certainly love that. And then Leslie referred to this also. There's no better retention tool available to that person that's taking that phone call to say, let me put you in a club that gives you more control, and it's a nice soft landing, and you can change the frequency of your shipments. You can change the wines that you want or how many you want, and
not even necessarily calling it a club. Let me be your personal shopper. Let me really customize this to you. That's why we at Wise you heard Liz say it, we use the term, it's not an ex-club member, it's a club alumni. They've graduated from your club. And only if you mistreat them will they actually leave your brand. They're not saying they're leaving your brand. They're just saying they're kind of done with the club for now. So I think the opportunity is, what's the next generation way that we can serve them on it?
I actually want to jump in on this part of the conversation. There's this dysfunctional belief out there that customization is too much work, or that it's not scalable. At one point in my career, I managed a wine club that had 11,000 wine club members, and 23% of them were in the special club.
And that's before technology did it for you, right?
Well, I mean, we don't need to talk about how many years ago that was, but yes, it was about 15 years ago.
Dinosaurs are roaming the earth.
Thank you, Leslie. Appreciate that. Yes. But what we were able to do were look for ways that we could automate in our very limited CRM capabilities that we had back in the dinosaur days. And so we looked for ways that we could segment people out. If they were no sweet wines, could they fall into the regular club shipment? Let's segment them out, tag them, and bill them with the traditional club. We were looking for efficiencies. And having that, when we distilled it down, so out of 11, let's use easy math, 10,000 wine club members, 2,500 of them were in a custom club. Of that, the ones that we had to process by hand, ended up being maybe 200. We could put them in some type of batch or collectively, grab that group of all of those that shared that attribute, put them together. So even in a 10 or 11,000 wine club, you can do this. It is scalable.
And now today, it's way easier. I've got a client that Wise Winery that we've been working with that was really hesitant. They actually are on Jim's platform on Wine Direct, and they were really hesitant about going to the customization because they figured even if the technology did it, it was still just too complicated. They have a lot of different wines and lots of different SKUs, and we plan out years in advance what wine is going to go through the club, and what if everybody just decided they wanted, something that we haven't been planning for. And what we found as they launched this, that with careful wording, first of all, they were also really paranoid that people would be trading down, because you could technically do that, like, hey, I just don't want, those expensive Pinot Noirs. And I'm going to take something, I'm going to take a lot more whites or whatever it is. And through wording and tweaking of offering the customization option to their club members, the net positive is average order value has gone up on shipments. Now, not every single person, but on average, it's a net positive. And it's too early to tell. We believe it's going to improve retention rates because the few people, the 20% who are customizing, with these guys it's actually only 15, who are customizing, then we think they're going to stay longer because it's Burger King, like have it your way, right? It's exactly what they want. Now, we haven't been at it long enough, less than a year, to really see that, but so far so good. And I think also what happens is, I know from the visitor center standpoint, it could be training, it could be incentive compensation, but their conversion rates on getting people to sign up for the club went up dramatically too. It's exactly what Jim just said. Everybody thinks they're going to customize. Oh, isn't that cool? But a smaller percentage actually do. That doesn't mean it's not a successful program. It's very successful. And we're fine if the default order ends up being the normal club.
Yeah, and I think for me to adopt that and to embrace that when we had such a large club, we kind of played around with the numbers, and we decided that, would I take 100 wine club members calling me and placing a $200 order all day, every day, right? Why wouldn't I do that 4 times a year with my wine club and through customization?
We've had 2 questions come in that are actually on clubs, so I'm gonna get to these now. One is, have you guys seen a correlation of increase or decrease in attrition as well as the member tenure, which is obviously connected, based on the number of shipments in relation to shipment price? So, do you have any?
Yeah.
My experience has more been on shipment frequency.
Yeah, I was going to say mine's been more on frequency because with price, it's related to the overall price points of your brand to begin with. So if your price points skew higher anyway, and you're attracting that type of guest anyway, it's not so much the price sensitivity, it's more the frequency sensitivity.
However, what we do see, and this is for sure, is let's say you have a club that is a 3-bottle club and a 6-bottle option and a 12-bottle option. Your dramatically bigger amount of your club group is going to be on the 3-bottle. Those are also less sticky. Your 6-bottle and 12-bottle, they'll be less, but still please have it, because let's say the 12-bottle is only, 20% of what the 3 bottles are in terms of membership, but it's harder for your team members to sell in, and when they do, the guest actually stays longer. We definitely have seen
I've seen
data
that.
on that.
Absolutely.
I mean, in every club we've run. So that's why we also want to have that incentive compensation in alignment. Don't be chintzy. You know, if you're paying $20 for a 3-bottle club, please pay $40 for the 6-bottle, and please pay $80 for the 12-bottle. It's just math. You know, it's linear, and frankly, you'll be able to hold on to it a lot more.
I 100% agree with that.
Cool. The other question was for Jim. In Wine Direct, is there an easy way to get reports on this data in terms of your own club, you know, attrition, retention, things like that?
So,
Tenure of a member.
yeah, I mean, the answer is yes. All the data is in there and available. The definition of what easy is probably varies from person to person. If you have like a data orientation or you're an engineer, you think it's beautiful. But you know, we don't necessarily. There's not a button you can hit that shows your, you know, rate, attrition rate by club at this moment. One thing we have been doing increasingly is there's a neat thing that's happening is that there's this kind of community of dashboards that are being built on top of our platform. You know, Wise has their set of data that they look for. It's basically like you know, if you're going to the health clinic for your business, you can get a checkup and they know, like, they can extract that data. And then we have a couple other dashboard partners that we've enabled so that they can just, on an ongoing basis, work with wineries to create a data set that works for them. So again, it is easy, the data's in there, but my recommendation is to, and these are economical solutions, is to work with a third party that can give you a dashboard that allows you to actually customize your views. Just one of the problems we run into, it's fun to say we have 1,800 winery clients, but what...
They all want it different.
Well,
They all want it their way.
But what winery A calls, like, you know, that's not how I measure attrition. You know, and winery B might measure, you know, measure differently if someone downgrades one club to another. So we've always defaulted to, like, let's just make all the data available and give it to the professionals to, you know, chew for the individual wineries.
So one of the things we do when working with winery clients, like who are on Wine Direct, is we'll download that, you know, when people started and when people quit, so you get the number of months, and then you graph it out, and you end up seeing, first a couple things come out. One is it looks like a double humped camel, right? Meaning at the start, you know, just right after people sign up, there's always that, oh my God, how many, you know, wine clubs did I sign up for this weekend? And so there's a little natural attrition. Hopefully that is not exacerbated by improper selling of the club. But then there's the normal hump, the kind of that bell curve that's going to happen, well, on average, as he just said, 31 months out. What we find is you actually do that graph differently for each of your clubs. That second hump is going to be maybe around 18 to 20 months on, and now it's very different for every winery, but it'll be a shorter time frame for your 3-bottle club and longer for those 6 and 12s, again, because they're more sticky, which is pretty interesting.
And just to answer the question about getting information out, I did this the old-fashioned way back in the olden days. I guess it was after YouTube was around, but I learned how to do pivot tables on YouTube. If the information was in my system and I could dump it out to Excel some way, somehow, I could pivot table the heck out of it. And I spent an hour watching YouTube videos to learn how to do pivot tables. Probably the best hour that I spent watching YouTube. Other than a couple cat videos, but whatever.
There's a question saying that Wine Business Monthly a while ago did a whole kind of review over all the different e-commerce and POS solutions, and is there another article coming out soon? I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm on their board, so I will put the request in. Let's see. Another question is, if you're using the Wine Direct Custom Club program, is there a way to predict how company allocations and sales channel for a year? Let me see. For a year, if your club shipments are completely customizable.
Right. So this is one of the common concerns with regard to setting up a custom club, is it kind of blows up your forecasting. So my first part is just kind of remember that not that many people are going to choose, but you can set max min on every wine. So if you want to be, we use the example of everyone kind of migrating to this, like, I'm going to buy 2 Sauvignon Blancs and just kind of ride this out. Well, you can set like an allocation where you have to have at least 2 of your tier A wine and 2 of your tier B wine. And so you could see that that's going to narrow the range of potential like outcomes at the end of the day.
And also, and I said it quickly but with a client that I was referencing before that was extremely worried about this, the wording they used in how they told their members about the custom club made all the difference in the world, and we're continuing to tweak it a little bit, but it's very impactful. Like, the whole positioning is not, hey, don't take the Cabernet. No, it's really about, you can add to your order. I mean, you've got 4 bottles, don't let those extra 2 slots in the 6-pack travel alone. That's so lonely. I mean, there's some fun you can have with it of really trying to upsell, not just, yes, and people who want to swap out certainly can.
And over the years, what I've been able to do is kind of hone in when I put in working with winemaking of what my needs are. And especially because you're taking the long-term view, right? I mean, you've got, if you reverse engineer it all the way back from vine to harvest to in barrel then into bottle, I mean, you're thinking a couple of years out with your club. You should be looking at a minimum of 3 to 5 years out, and you refine as you get closer to those target dates and harvest dates. But one of the things that I also look at is, okay, what is my natural credit card decline rate going to be? Obviously, I'm going to work hard to recover some of that, but there's some that I'm not going to be able to recover. What does my reorder rate look like? And so I start to put allocations within my club and just kind of sketch it out and have some rough ideas. And it's going to be dependent upon how your club behaves. But if you have some historical information, you can go back there and look at some of those, how you forecasted what kind of wine you needed. And you have to do some internal controls.
Yeah. So I think at the start we didn't know that, back to that winery I was talking about, and now a year and a half in, the prediction indicators are pretty good. But it's not, that doesn't necessarily come, the system allows you to, have guardrails, which are important, but the actual learning how your customers and club members are going to respond is, it's some trial and error and then putting in forecasting. But it can work.
Now might be a good time to bring up that when you create these custom clubs, that you're not just exposing your entire catalog and giving a consumer 55 decisions that they have to make before you can execute the club shipment. What you really want to do is...
you're choosing what you want to put into the custom.
100%, and you need to stay within those guardrails. Do not give too many choices. There's a lot of interesting science around decision fatigue, and that, if you give someone too many choices, they're just going to bail out. This is why
a confused mind always says no.
Correct.
I've got a 4-year-old. Would you like to wear the jacket or the sweater today? It's going to be one of those two. Yeah, so it's the same kind of thought process.
Yeah, you don't want to give the whole universe of options. If you look at kind of the evolution of shopping cart and checkout experiences, if you think about how easy is it to check out at Amazon and Apple, we have been, like, each and every year we're reducing the number of questions that we ask people at that critical moment. That's not the time to ask if they want to also subscribe to a mailing list or set up an alternate shipping address. You just really need to consummate that sale as soon as possible. So same thing, you want that club shipment to progress from the indecision mode into actionable and shippable. So you make it as simple as possible. And more on this later, but it also needs to pass what we call the pajama test. So when someone gets that email saying we're preparing your club shipment, they need to be able to action that email, select the shipment without getting out of their bed at 10:30 at night and firing up their laptop or tablet so they can see the screen and find their credit card. It has to be something they can do in an elevator, in a cab, without putting their slippers on.
That's cool. So let's, we are going to have some more time for Q&A at the end. Let's move on to some average order value. Here's your clicker.
Oh, great. I want to say one last thing about why did consumers leave? You know, that 27% bad experience, I only have one quick note on this, but, you know, if it seems like consumers are more touchy about things like mispicks, late shipments, not receiving email notifications about things, it's because they are. Like, these are things that were like viewed, say, like 5 years ago as like nice to have, and now if you don't have you know, an email notification that or shipment notification that goes out within 6 or 10 hours of a credit card being charged, you're going to have an irate person on your hand making allegations of fraud. And it's just because consumers have this really high sensitivity towards towards fraud, data security, thanks Facebook and others, but and also delivery convenience. So that bad experience is like, this should be, everybody should be investing time to just like iron out things like delivery, time to delivery, communication around delivery, stuff like that, because of Amazon and, you know, Zappos and everybody else out there, Nike and the giants of e-commerce have mastered this piece. And even though we are, you know, largely a small industry, especially when you slice just the direct-to-consumer part, we're held to those same high expectation and same bar that's being set by, you know, these multi-deca-billion-dollar companies. It's just something we have to live with now.
Very cool.
All right. So,
Yeah, this section first, yeah.
okay, great. So sales revenue by channel. So this is fun to look at. So if you just look at all wineries, so what we're measuring here is across our entire platform, what is the revenue distribution by channel? So you have Wine Club, everybody knows what that is, tasting room, website, this is traditional e-commerce, and then other, which is mostly telephone sales, if I really drilled into that. But in our world, it's any order that's entered in through the admin panel, so it's some sort of...
So telephone, but also events would be in there as well.
events and corporate orders.
Got it.
So like where there's like a person on your staff that's going into, you know, kind of the back end and entering these orders. So it'd be nice to have a little more clarity around that, but just to explain like others, like, man, we really have to work on our other, like that's a big chunk. So now let's drill into Oregon wineries for a second. And, you know, when you look at Tasting Room and Wine Club, those are, you know, about the same when you compare to the rest of the universe, but there's clearly like one glaring point here, and that's web orders. So web orders are trailing national averages by like, you know, 50%. So, you know, I look at that as an opportunity certainly worth exploring a little bit. And just to kind of support that point, and we'll explore it together here in a moment. So now this is average order value by channel. We have this is again for all wineries, and POS has remained flat over the past couple of years.
And POS is the tasting room number.
Yeah, that tasting room. Club is really the bright story on this slide. You know, up 50% per order by 2015. So there's obviously some like, you know, magic here around the Wine Club. But the thing, you know, especially when you consider that Oregon wineries only have 6% of their revenue coming from their website, the average order value from a web order is pretty much a hair under $300. So outpacing Club and certainly outpacing the transaction value in the tasting room. So there's some gold to be mined there. And then further, when you look at Oregon against the averages, you know, for an Oregon winery, the average order value for web orders is above $200. Again, outpacing Club and tasting room orders as well. So, you know, why do we think this is interesting? Well, you know, when we started to kind of peel back the onion, I think everyone's doing a really great job converting people to Club. There's still some gold to be mined around retention. We talked about that previously. But this web opportunity really, in my estimation, is the biggest opportunity that's within the grasp of every single winery out there. And there's basically two levers that I see that you can pull to really do a much better job selling online. One is all around data capture. So do everything you can to use that, the peak of the experience that consumer is going to have with your brand is when they're at the tasting room. They're, fully or mostly lubricated, and that's the time to ask them and everyone in their party for their email address so you can continue that relationship. And I'd love to hear from you guys what your experience has been about building incentive programs around this, because what I always hear from wineries that we work with, it's like, totally, we want to double down on e-com. I can't get my staff to collect emails. And how do you break through that?
Yeah, so I think, you guys have heard me say this before, people respect what you inspect. And so if the things that you're measuring that to help the team go forward and paying, whether it's incentive compensation or contests or whatever, that should be a key metric, the same way you're looking at what are your conversion rates and your average order values in the tasting room and your conversion rate to club. For the wineries who don't just have incentive comp on club, but also have it on wine sales and also have it on data capture, guess what? They have a heck of a lot more wine sales and they have a heck of a lot more data capture. The cool part about coming up with what's the right dollar amount that you should pay per new email sign up is you've got the data, because the value. First of all, the majority of campaigns, the majority of what drives the business is off of email campaigns. We were talking about that last night still. And so that if you have 100 new email names and they're well qualified, meaning they were in your property, they had a great brand experience, and you've just got the data, for every 100 that you email out, how many dollars do you get back? And so I can't tell you, but you can tell you, can you afford to pay $1 or $2? On Class on Monday, someone said $5, but hey, they're doing the math that is worthwhile investment. It's an easy win it's changing the culture. Go ahead.
Yeah, and what really hits home for me on this one is my personal tasting room in San Francisco. I wanted to see where I ranked, and so I produced Russian River Pinot Noir. I Googled Russian River Pinot Noir, and I'm a small producer. We make 2,000 cases. We were nowhere to be found on the internet. People are not organically finding my tasting room. Go in there, put your phone in incognito mode on Google, and do a search. See how crowded the space is. With one region, I did some study on this, and Amazon was the number one thing that came up. Amazon's not in the wine game anymore, but it's capturing your SEO. And so when I realized that people are not going to find my winery organically online, they have to have some knowledge of my brand. Well, for a 2,000 case brand, I don't have a whole heck of a lot of shelf space out there, but what I do have is 20,000 visitors who walk in through my door every year. And so of those 20,000 visitors, how many of them am I capturing? When we did mystery shopping, this most recent round that we did, we were asked exactly 0 times to keep in touch with wineries going forward.
Not once.
Not once. Goose egg.
No second dates.
Yeah, no, which was unfortunate, because we bought wine. When I review transactions and when I'm looking at what's happening in my business when I'm not there on the weekends or when I'm not there during the week, and I'm flipping through and I see a 3-bottle purchase or I see a 6-bottle purchase and no consumer attached to that, I'm like, wow, I just set myself up for failure. And so we became so much of a cultural thing for my tasting room. They got tired of hearing me. Go back to people respect what you inspect. They got absolutely tired of hearing me say, all right, we had a 3-bottle purchase, we're not going out with them again. So my team started just to not listen to me complain about it all the time. They actually started data collecting and attaching it to transactions. And so now it's part of our culture. It's something that we do regularly. And boy, do they fess up if they mess up. They let me know. And they go back in and they try and put the information in and they capture that information.
So there's the badger them to death, which clearly
Hey,
eventually will work. You could also inspire, not require, right? You could
Well, yeah, I guess there's
pay
that
them
too.
for it. The other thing, before we leave this slide, that really jumps out at me, and this is kind of, as you guys know, Wise does a lot of, training and leadership development in direct-to-consumer, but training tasting room staff, look at the average order value of the tasting room staff. And do you ever hear from your team members like, oh, we just don't have buyers in that'll buy more? But no, the same buyers are buying from the website more than 3 times the size, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And okay, so we say that there's maybe a shipping incentive email that we did, and that's what's driving people to the traffic to
For
the
the
website
website?
and having them transact. Great. Are you using shipping as a tool in your tasting room? What is the programming? What are the incentives that you have for your guests in the tasting room to be transacting with you?
Yeah. So there's something physically that we're doing in the 4 walls of the tasting room that are clearly from this chart leaving dollars on the table, which is, I actually look at it and get kind of excited because they're like, wait, we could be doing,
Yeah, I look at the
doing better.
white space,
Yeah.
and I see that white space is just as potential that's on there.
Very cool.
So a question you might be asking yourself, or you might say like, well, we do a pretty good job capturing emails in the tasting room. I think we do a great job, and we already kind of benchmark what a really bad job is. It's 0. And so we did a study where we looked at 20 wineries in Oregon and Washington in advance of a meeting last year, and the very best in that group that we picked out, like we handpicked them because we're like, these guys kick ass at DTC. The very best was collecting emails on 50% of the transactions. And so that was it. That was like that's the top of the heap. And then when you start to slice that a little bit, they're converting, about 1/3 of those are wine club members. So like those are like freebies. You're getting your emails from those folks. So anyway, it's just a nice benchmarking number if you want to look at your own data and see how many transactions in your tasting room have emails attached to them. 50% is, okay, but there's no reason you shouldn't be much closer to, 80 and
Yeah.
up.
When we see wineries go higher than that, what we find is this is kind of binary. It's either, beyond your wine club signups, if you haven't found a way to crack the code and get your team excited and focused on data capture, then you're probably capturing less than 10%, probably less than 5%. But if you crack the code, it's usually it's easily 50, and it can be in the high 60s, 70s. You're never going to get it 100%. That's okay. You shouldn't be shooting for it. That would be a little creepy. But it's usually that high. So that just tells me it's this real kind of culture thing. The wineries who are really good getting up in those 70 plus, one of the things they do is invite both members of the couple to sign up. First of all, nobody wants to be sold to, but everybody likes to be invited. So literally pushing that card across the table, across the bar, like, hey, we'd love to keep in touch, and don't just give them one, give them 2. Because who are we to say who's going to answer that email and be the deciding factor? And I think
Yeah, the last thing my husband's going to do is send me an email that a rosé or a sparkling wine is being released.
it's not going to happen.
It just doesn't happen at Chateau Mercer, I guarantee it. Yeah. Also, along those lines, Leslie, I did have I think I told you this years ago, I had a 100% collection day. I had 8 people in the tasting room on midweek in February, but we had 100% data capture.
You can build on that.
Yeah. I rode that one high for a while.
Start that. You guys are great.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on, Jim.
Cool. So what else we got going here? All right, so I mentioned 2 levers. One is data capture, and I think we hit that one nice and hard. The other is your website mobile friendly? Liz recommended, just how do you test this? Just go to your website right now. What does mobile friendly mean? It does not mean like a scaled down version. If you have to do like any pinching and zooming, you might hear the words responsive. That's like the ideal case because that means your technology is going to detect whether it's a tiny laptop, a tablet, a big phone. The phone is sideways or it's vertical. So that sort of stuff. So just test drive this. Why is this important? Well, on our platform, we've seen increasing mobile visitation like massively, like 20% year over year. But something kind of amazing happened last year where we saw mobile orders increase by 30%. So mobile orders never increased at the same rate as mobile visitors. So it indicated to us that, one, there was maybe something with the technology that needed to be improved, but 2, that maybe people weren't ready to do that. So, how did we attack this? Well, we did instant login, so when you go to the website, you don't have to go get, that's the pajamas test, you don't have to go get your phone. We enabled alternate payment services like PayPal, so like you don't have to leave, you can do it in the elevator right there. So this is a key thing to kind of get yourself ready for the next wave of consumers. And when you talk about like, how can I get my business ready for, the passing or the moving on of the baby boomers, like, yeah, you have to have like your technology super tight. Just some other notes, it's projected by 2021, 54% of online purchases are predicted to be mobile. So, the wine business is just kind of getting there and it's almost in line with the nation as a whole. And then when surveyed, 51% of users say they will abandon their cart if it's not mobile optimized. And like, that's like 100% true. If you guys probably have experienced that in your own life. I'm in the business, so like I'm like so quick to pull the trigger. I'm like, you suck, you don't get my money, and I'm gone, because I start thinking like, well, if this is what the website does, like, well, their fulfillment center is going to be a mess too, and they're gonna lose my credit card, and I'm out just like that. So I imagine there's at least a couple hundred people like me out there.
No, and I think, when we're talking about driving people to our business as well, our bricks and mortar business, it's critical. People aren't lugging around a desktop with them when they're in their car driving to your tasting room. So online, on their device, when they're trying to find my tasting room, how clean is it? How easy is it to find? Visit us.
Back in the day, actually, I was involved in launching the first, now this is dinosaurs were still around, launching the first 125 wineries on the internet back in the year 2000. And that was, I would call that would be the bleeding edge versus the leading edge. And I think the challenge back at that time, one is, none of us knew what we were doing, but also the technology hadn't caught up yet with this was just the baby version, right? There's great that is no longer an excuse. There's great technology solutions out there today. So what do you think's holding us back?
Skills. We are a small but mighty team at my winery, and I just don't have the core competencies on my team. And so I had to outsource.
So how does that work?
Yeah, so I just recently, I'm actually in the middle of the transition right now. We realized that our website sucked, which for me to stand up here as a coach and say that is really embarrassing. But that was also the reality of the situation, because we were dealing with so many other things in our business, and we just didn't have anyone that had that core competency. Fantastic selling on the tasting room floor. I've got, a great person who's amazing in the cellar and as overseeing my winemaking. None of us have the core competency to keep up with everything that's happening on the technology front and in the digital world. So I found an agency, a small agency that works with small brands like mine, and was able to offer a solution for far less than I had ever imagined. And so when I said, they asked me, what's a perfect world look like to you? And I'm like, well, I'd like beautiful emails to go out on a regular schedule. Novel concept. I would like, there to be some social component. I would like there to be integration. I would like my website to be updated frequently. I would like all these things that I had put together. And they said, yeah, we can do that. And they came back with the price, and I was like, is that missing a zero? Like, I really thought that it was missing a zero. Like, I thought it was so far out of my league. And so I found the right agency for my size brand that had the core competency to keep up with the digital that I just didn't have.
So we've actually done the same thing really in the last 6 months with the Wise Academy, because we're like, it's ironic because we're out there, Dr. Heal Thyself training. Like,
yeah.
we're a small team. We're way too busy focusing on other stuff that's more important, and it kept dropping to the bottom of the pile. So we hired adult supervision, and we outsourced it too.
I hired adult supervision. Same thing.
Okay.
I just want to add to that, actually. According to the conversation that was happening with the Silicon Valley Bank and Wine Business Monthly, they reported that 8% of all wineries have a dedicated full-time person to data analytics and to digital optimization.
I mean, only 8%.
Only 8%. Yeah. So what that says to me is that even as an industry, we may not have the bench strength to be pulling from to have that. And so then that made all the more sense.
Yeah, just if you find someone who's eating, sleeping, breathing, drinking it on a daily basis,
Yeah.
digital is their world because it changes so fast. I'd rather just, make sure we're partnering with someone who does that.
Yep.
Cool.
Okay.
All right, so shifting gears just a little bit, in last year it seemed like, you hear on the news that, Amazon's eating the world and Toys R Us is out of business, and if you go to a local mall, it's, a wasteland and a third of the stores are either vacant or, some kind of off-brand thing that you've never heard of before. And when you investigate this, it was clear that, consumers were choosing the convenience of the internet and kind of rejecting, big box stores because it's just a bunch of selection. And why would you want to go there and just hope you find the thing you want when the internet's out there? But then kind of another story started to emerge in the second half of the year where you see retailers and brands and a lot of like digitally native brands, these are like companies that were born on the internet, that were opening up brick and mortar stores, and it was all around experience. And you would go into one of these stores and it's kind of limited inventory, but like very narrowly focused on that one brand. And it's staffed by people who are
Evangelists.
They're nuts about the brand, and you're in a store with other people that are nuts about the brand. And these are places that are kind of oriented towards, social sharing and hanging out, and not just like a, kind of a burn and churn retail experience. And if you start to kind of like unpack that a little bit, it sounds, exactly like what winery tasting room is, right? And I always like to say, like, this is like great. This is one of the, the first times in recent history that we could just say as an industry, like, yeah, wineries are on trend. There's this flight to quality. People want to get closer to the actual manufacturer. They want to know who's making their product. What do they stand for? This is like the craft revolution. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with this concept. So it's like, great, wineries are on trend. And now you see everyone doubling down on experience, right? You're not just rolling out the wine and pouring 3 2-ounce pours and hanging back. And so when you see wineries doubling down on experience, and that could mean a big wide range of things, they have a more intimate relationship with the guest, one-on-one. It's more personal. And then the magic is higher club conversion rates, and then higher average order value in the tasting room. So there's these really nice like downstream effects, but the reality is there are other things that come along with that, right? You have to cost justify the fact that now you have a guitarist and you have small plates and shiatsu massage on every Thursday.
Wait, what tasting room is that?
That's all the Brooks Winery it's in Dundee in kombucha. I am not. First of all, that's my favorite place to visit. By the way, and they also have very great strong Wi-Fi signal if you need to hunker down and get some work done. I'm probably not their favorite customer.
You're describing like I want to go camp. I'm going to go spend a couple hours there.
So that's just one idea, for their brand. But there's other things you have to consider. Right now, you have guests that are staying for a longer time. You can literally squatters. You can see fewer people, right? If you're gonna spend 3 hours or 2 hours with a guest, you're gonna have fewer chances to sell. So maybe these higher conversion and the higher average order value solves those problems for you, but it's worth exploring in a deeper way. I think that you've got more on that in a moment. But I guess the only point I'm trying to make is it puts a premium on attracting the right customer for your brand and the right amount of customers for your model. And there's a few ways to go about doing that.
Cool. Yeah, and I think, in the retail environment, you're seeing the businesses that are thriving, going back to your point, that offer that experiential element. We were made for that. Like, our very nature, our DNA is all that. So I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Yeah. So, and I know where you guys stand on this, but I'll ask the rhetorical question anyway. There was a lot of things in the press this last year saying the tasting room's dead and it has to be all digital, and if you're not there, you suck. I think the three of us all strongly agree the tasting room is not dead. I mean, it's exactly this point. It's never been more on target, really driving to the consumer experience. Yes, digital's underdeveloped, and there's ways that you can leverage between the two, but.
Yeah, and for me, it's doing that exercise of looking at putting that organic search and seeing how my brand shows up, or more importantly, doesn't show up. There's 10,000 brands out there. It's impossible for me to stand out. I don't have the marketing budget of some of those large organizations to do that kind of SEO, and I don't have the in-house expertise either.
But if we get our team members over the roadblock on the data capture, we know emails work.
And there's a dysfunctional belief again that they're getting asked to join every mailing list at every single tasting room they go to. Clearly they're not.
Less than 11% of the time.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so ask. Keep in touch. They've already sought you out. 770 wineries in Oregon. They sought you out. They came and spent an hour or 90 minutes or an hour and a half with you. Why wouldn't we keep in touch?
Yeah. So part of this is looking at, one of the questions on your worksheet was, what are your peak months? The blue here is overall wineries in terms of tasting room sales, and then the yellow is Oregon. You have some unique things that specifically happen in this market because of your events. I mean, many of you, obviously, Memorial Day weekend is a huge, burst here, and then June stays pretty strong, but summer pulls back. And then October is strong, and November is probably the strongest we've seen in any wine region across the country, and we work with a lot of them because of you've got the big Memorial Day, and then you've got the weekend after Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's so you're using these events to drive traffic. It's also, as Jim just mentioned, it's creative tension as the experiences get more intimate or private, which is whether you choose to go there or not. It's the way the consumer's kind of going. And I'm not, I'd say the far end of the spectrum is what's been happening in Napa. In Napa, you'll read a lot about visitation, which is actually, that's the next slide. I don't have Napa, but just in general. Visitation in general had been, down or suffering across the country, but we've certainly had bright spots in Oregon over the last couple of years. It's been flat last year. This is a year-old data. The new data won't be released until May. But in general, over a 5-year trend, there's been a lot of growth here in Oregon because of all the work your associations are doing, and the quality of the wines, which is awesome. What's happening, if you looked at this chart in Napa and Sonoma, is you're really seeing a decline. It's not actually a decline in the visitors to the region, because those are up, despite some hiccups for fires and stuff. But what you're seeing is a decline in the visitation at the wineries because, on average, a consumer coming to visit wine country used to visit like 12 wineries in a long weekend, and now maybe it's 6. And it's literally about half. And so they're really challenged in trying to, make sure. The good news is, if you have these longer experiences, it does pay for itself. But I think what's happening down in Napa, this came up in the tourism session yesterday, of saying it's not something you want to aspire to because the price points are out of control and there's people just not going to the region. So I'm not talking about that. That's the far end of the spectrum. But somewhere between here and there is, and I've been having conversations with many of you that are testing the kind of more intimate experiences that are less only just belly up to the bar and 3 deep on Saturdays. It gets crazy, but those more intimate experiences absolutely result in higher conversion rates, higher average order values. Yes, it costs more labor, it takes more labor, and so costs increase your labor costs, but it way more than pays for itself. And so whether you're supporting it or not, the consumer's going there, because it's the experience economy, and that's what Jim was just talking about as these digital natives are going bricks and mortar because they realize that this is the way that consumers want to have a relationship with the brand.
I think it's the next slide is really interesting to support that, and how tasting fees are increasing.
Yep.
And I think that there are absolutely some lessons to be learned in this slide when we look at other regions and that one-upmanship that we talk so much about, and how we see that showing up in our world. There's a canary in a coal mine that's tweeting out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Are you suggesting that you can go too far with either the fees or the experience, or?
Well, it's just, I think that as a region, I mean, the horse is out of the barn. It's not whatever Napa's, Napa's Napa, but it's definitely have an impact that there's just entire subsets of groups that are not visiting there anymore. Mm-hmm. But there's also then the opportunity of just saying that a higher and more intimate experience there's room for that.
Yeah, and I think that that's looking at the white space,
yeah.
On these slides, is where is the upside, where is the potential. And I think that, yesterday we heard, especially in the Willamette Valley, 50% of your visitorship is local. Then we also heard in the morning session when we were looking at the PR report and where traffic or where PR is being generated, it's up a third in New York. So you have built it, they will come. And to me, the message in all that is be prepared. It's February now, the floodgates are going to open. How are you prepared? Are you focused on converting? Are you focused on data capture? Are you focused on the long-term relationship view?
One of the things that we've seen change really dramatically in terms of if we take a look at a direct-to-consumer manager's time or tasting room manager's time is in this environment we're talking about how much time is spent and how much time should be spent on proactive outreach activities to drive the right traffic. Mm-hmm. And we were in a conversation about this. I'm going to give this over to Liz to click on through. I'll hand that to you.
In a conversation. This is like a daily conversation for us.
We're geeks. We talk about this stuff all the time.
Yay. So these are, first I want to preface these three levers as saying that they are not mutually exclusive. And you can focus your energy on more than one. But there are certainly some challenges when you focus and double down on one over the other. And that being primarily if you focus on traffic over the others. And the reason that I feel pretty strongly about that is traffic tends to be influenced more by macroeconomic issues than what's happening in your four walls. Conversion rate is up to me and my team, and that happens in my four walls. Average order value happens within my four walls. I can control the climate within my four walls. I can turn up the heater, I can turn on the air conditioner. Where I can't impact the climate is when it comes to traffic. I can't avoid.
You can control it. You can't impact. I mean, you can't control it, but you can impact.
Yeah, I can't control it. Yes, and I do need to be doing my outreach. Absolutely, and I'm going to talk about some ways to get really granular when it comes to that in just a moment. But I want to lay the foundation here and come up with a common understanding that if gas prices hit $5 a gallon, that's out of my control. If there's a government shutdown and TSA agents aren't working, that's beyond my control. If there are fires, if there are earthquakes, if there are floods, if there are, insert disaster here, which unfortunately we've all had too many of, those are things that I can't control. I can react to them, but I can't control them. But I can impact traffic. Then we get into conversion rate. And that's really around conversion to purchase, conversion to club, and conversion to my mailing list. I can directly impact and control that through incentive compensation plan, through programming, through making it an emphasis, training, absolutely. Likewise with average order value. I can increase average order value in any number of ways, inorganically through taking my prices up. I can't do that every single year. But that is one way that you could do it. A more effective way would be training, having effective programming. And when I'm talking about programming, I'm saying things like, do we have messaging in place? We waive tasting fees at a certain bottle threshold purchase. Another way to program is, do we have a special on the floor that we talk about? Do we have signage? Do we have it mentioned on the menu?
Shipping incentives for certain volumes.
Especially if we think that we're going to have some guests coming in from out of state, we may want to be thinking more and more about that. So I did a study And we looked at, and this is where I got really good at pivot tables. This just came out of a point of sale system. The winery was dedicated
Names
to
were changed to protect the innocent.
and the guilty. Yeah, we won't tell you who it was, but it's nobody in this room, so you can all breathe easy. This particular winery captured the referral source on every single one of their 20,000 visitors. And no, this was not my tasting room either. They were fantastic about doing that. And this first slide, what we did was we just sorted by who sent us the most visitors. Not surprisingly, returning wine club members was the primary driver, followed pretty closely behind by referred friends of members. What was interesting, if you notice on that total line down at the bottom, my average dollar per guest was $38. What this showed the winery specifically, and they went back to their team and explained, how many of us have that dysfunctional belief that, oh, wine club members don't buy when they come into the tasting room? Well, this actually dispels that pretty clearly. Wine club members were transacting, and not only were they transacting at a much higher rate than our average dollars per guest. They're only here to get their wine club shipments. They're not here to buy additional wine. No, when we ask, they'll buy. That's kind of the point of joining a wine club.
So one comment on this is, in yesterday's, there was the tourism breakout session here, and they said that wine club members, like, why weren't they buying? And it's because they were already club members. And it's like,
Yeah.
wow, that's not what any data I've ever seen for wineries who really dig into this. I've never seen that be the case. So,
Yeah. And this is
food for
live,
thought. Dig into your data.
yeah, live data. One thing that you don't see on here that I do want to caution is that friend of member line, the third one down. What they did find, and I don't have this on any other slide, but I'll just verbally tell you, they did find that they actually converted to wine club quite a bit, and more than the traditional other.
So it doesn't look
Traffic
that good in
sources.
terms of selling wine, but really good for membership.
Absolutely, and birds of a feather flock together. So if you've got folks who are coming in with wine club members, asking them to join your wine club as well, that is a solid strategy. Don't fall into that dysfunctional belief that they don't convert to wine club. But it was really interesting when they started to dig down just on who was sending them the most number of people. Then we just sorted the columns differently. And we said, okay, who is sending us the most revenue? Again, not surprisingly, the ones in green are the ones that are higher than our $38. So returning wine club members were driving
And these
our
are,
revenue.
just to clarify, these are different categories because you went in and unpacked that data of the stuff that was in the all others, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
So that all other category we looked at, we really dug into that. That club member Elle Mercer, man, she's got some rich friends. They were coming and they were buying wine.
And
So
Jay,
again,
and Jay Agger's friends are like even more crazy.
I know, dude, you only sent 6 wine club members. How many friends do you got there, buddy? You
Who
need to be
are
sending
they
your
and who are
friends
their
in.
people?
All my friends are going to come in and ask for industry discounts.
Yeah, who cares? They're spending $1,700 when they come in. All right, then they had done some different group packages, and so they found that those were actually transacting higher than the average. They found one particular winery that was referring them that was way over indexing. Granted, they had only sent 78 guests, but those 78 guests were spending on average $115 each time they were coming in. Let's go find out who at that winery likes us. You know, do we have complementary portfolios? What is it that we have? Because clearly, our consumers, our guests, that's who we want to be trading traffic back and forth with. Then we took it a step further, and again, that all others line, we really wanted to dive into that and understand what was happening in that all others. This is where your pivot tables come in really handy. We started looking at who was sending us dollars per guest. Again, that Jim guy. We looked at their support for their local winery association, that they had donated experiences or whatever they had done. That had actually had some really positive returns for them. Again, that winery number 1, that club member, hotel number 2 that they were following was indexing higher. That Leslie gal, she's got some friends who are sending some good people. They were tracking their print ads that they were doing in a local magazine. Didn't send a whole heck of a lot of people, or a whole heck of a lot of people that cited that. But again, that was indexing higher. TripAdvisor guests were higher. Another hotel, a driver. So when we dug in and we really unpacked that all others, what we were able to see was, where should this winery be spending their energy? Where should they be spending their time? And it really started to break down some of the thought process that they had about their outreach and what they thought versus what the data actually showed. And I'm in the same camp. My time is extremely limited. My budgets are even more so limited. Marketing budget, what the heck is that? Who's got, I don't have a huge marketing budget. I have to be really judicious with my time and my money. And so when I was working with this winery, we were able to really dig in and come up with some strategies of where they wanted to spend their energy and grow their business. And they were this is really, by the definition, this is low-hanging fruit, right? If they know that their average dollars per guest is $38, go find the ones that are indexing higher. Go develop those relationships. Yeah. And they did with great,
fish where the fish are, right?
Yeah, fish where the fish are. And they did fantastic on it. Which kind of, Jim, I'm going to toss it over to you. One of these, somewhere in here, said something about, online reservations.
Okay, great.
So we saw some online reservations coming in.
So, we talked about declining visitation and how attracting the right guest is critical. Yet, there's one kind of surprising detail that we've uncovered here, is that 90% of reservation discovery begins with search. So, balance the fact that most consumers are, before they start their trip to Wine Club, they're just, randomly plotting around.
To Wine Country.
Oh, sorry, Wine Country, yeah.
I thought that was a good Freudian slip.
They are just searching. So it's really important that your business is able to be located online. But we also talked earlier, it's hard, right? So without dedicated help. So, at Wine Direct, we set off to try to solve this problem. And one kind of concept that we've been doubled down on recently is we want to help our winery customers borrow reach, because getting reach online is really expensive and hard to do. So, how do businesses generally get reach? Well, they have media outreach. They do a lot of content production. They are invest in SEO and pay-per-click and retargeting campaigns to drive traffic to their website. But, it might not be rocket science, but it's pretty damn close to rocket science to figure all those things out and become a master. So we understand that most of our customers are wineries that have like 2 to 20 employees, right? You don't have a senior vice president of digital customer acquisition. So what we've endeavored to do is tap into networks that can send traffic to qualified traffic to wineries on our platform. So, we woke up one day, and through this exploration, we've really found that like online reservations are turning out to be this killer app. Why is it a killer app? Because you're attaching your brand where you're one in a constellation of many, and those whether it's TripAdvisor, or we work with a company called Talk, and there's others that are wine industry specific. They do a really good job drawing traffic, and then when you book at one winery, you are automatically getting referred to maybe 2, 3, and 4. And most people, which is very different than restaurant reservations, when they make one winery reservation, they're actually going to hammer out an itinerary. So this online reservation allowed us to investing in online reservations allowed us to tip the table in favor of wineries on our platform. And some other cool things kind of happened from this. So I mentioned earlier that you're going to have to, when you have fewer visitors, you're going to have to make those visits count. Well, one of the things that, if any of you have experience working in restaurants, is the concept of table management. So your difference between a good day and your best day ever is usually filling those shoulder periods. So those less than desirable tastings at 10 a.m. and maybe 3:30. So anybody can kind of fill on a busy Saturday at the peak time, but you really want to fill in those shoulder times. So these online reservation tools allow you to create incentives, hold back inventory, just like you're managing tables at a restaurant or inventory at a hotel. And so I guess the last thing I want to leave with everyone here on this concept is, okay, so you're spending an extra hour with each guest. You don't have as many touches. You're going to have to focus on those marginal cases in the early and the afternoon time. And these tools use automation to do this, because if you're trying to do it with the spreadsheet, it gets cumbersome. And then last point about 90% of reservation discovery starts with search. A lot of these companies have native integrations with social. So if you're, most wineries are actually doing a great job on social. If you have an active Instagram following and account, you can actually turn on an Instagram integration and people can book now directly from your feed. So same thing with Google Maps, same thing with Google Search, and a few other options, Yelp. So you can just widen your funnel and just put your brand in front of as many eyeballs as possible. And all that stuff I just described doesn't really cost anything on the front end, because it's already wired in if you're choosing the right service. So the last piece is like data capture. We talked about how important data capture is. When you're coming through this online source, you're going to get a wealth of data capture or data about that consumer that allows you to personalize the experience. One of my favorite examples of this is we have a winery that's asking kind of an odd question: what is your rock and roll spirit animal? All right, and so they give you 5 choices, and if you choose like Steely Dan or Rolling Stones or Metallica or Aretha Franklin, guess what's playing in your private room when you arrive? They'll make a playlist around songs that you like. So it's just like it's a way for them to just get way ahead on the personalization piece, and it goes all the way down. Nut allergy, gluten insensitivity, all this other stuff you can figure out in advance, have your staff prepared, and the way it's used in practical application is at your your weekly meeting. All right, we've got some reservations coming in today. At 2:30 we have Larry coming in, and they have nut allergy and they like the Pixies, and then you can have at it.
So question about that. I did some work with a winery that was doing phone calls to confirm the reservations. Do you is that automated at all on your?
So no, there's no automation of outbound phone calls, but there's texting that's built in. So it's like if you're 30 minutes out ahead of your reservation, you're going to receive a text message with a link to a map, and you're on your phone, you're in wine country, and you can get your directions or reply if you're not going to be present. Again, that's another effort to help you fill the seats. And so just last bit, I do have a couple case studies, but we're short on time. Argyle Winery, which many of you are familiar with, use the integrated online reservation system with our platform, and they saw a significant reduction in no-shows. And when you present your reservation tiers, it's always recommended don't just present 2, present 3, and they saw an increase in the number of guests that purchased the upgraded experience when you give those 3 choices, right? It's bronze, silver, gold. Most people are gonna pick, if you offer just 2, they're gonna pick the lower of the 2, but if you offer 3, they're gonna pick the higher of the 2. And it helps drive up that tasting room average order value.
Good, better, best options.
Yep, for sure. So that's it's a cool thing, and I just like this because it's very leveraged for a winery. It doesn't cost a lot to do this up front, and it's automated, so you don't have to dedicate a bunch of time to analysis or integration and that sort of thing. So, and then obviously on the back end, you can provide better experience.
Cool.
Right.
Yeah.
So here's the answers. We talked about most of these things, but it came up in the conversation to the worksheet that you have in front of you for the industry benchmarks. While you guys are filling in that portion, if you haven't already, of your worksheets, I want to get to a couple there's a lot of questions that have come in. I'm going to try to knock out some of the housekeeping ones first. And so, Jim, is shipping included in the website average order value, or is it wine only?
It's total transaction value without tax. So shipping would be included.
So yes,
in that.
shipping, no
Yeah,
tax.
correct.
Okay. And so,
Good question.
if most local wine club pickups in the tasting room, are we counting them as tasting room sales or club? That's going to be however the individual winery is ringing it up, right? If they're ringing it up as tasting room, it would be counted as the POS order, but if they rung it up under club, then it would be club, right?
So, no, if it,
Okay.
it's order source. So this is like a very technical perspective, but if it came through your POS device, it's going to be marked as tasting room.
Tasting room, right.
If it was run as part of club batch processing, it's club order.
Got it, okay.
If a club member then, furthermore, went to the website, it's going to be counted as a website order.
Right.
Yeah.
But there are ways, I know in your system, because I've got clients that do it, you can still cross-reference customer type and pull the data out. So you can be looking at, for web, how many were club members.
Which
And
channels
for
they
ta-
act
Yeah, which,
in.
there's
Yeah.
the category type of the customer and the channel that triggered that order.
Yep.
And you can look at it both ways.
All those categories are channels.
Right, but what we shared up there of what